to is I think it's really important to always have a goal in mind and be clear about your goals. But in this case, this is sort of like from the outset, it's sort of like you're trying to get an overall picture, and you've got this massive picture that you know is there of the universe or yourself or whatever you want to think of it as. And from the outset, you don't know what most of it is. All you can do is look at this one small piece that you have the information of. Like, you see this small piece of the picture, and you try to gauge what the rest of it looks like based on that. And we do this without even realizing it in normal life. We assume what life is and how things are. And as a result of that, we make gross assumptions about what fills in the blanks, what the rest of the picture looks like, and even how big that picture is.
Okay, so what you're telling us to do in our Magick diary is not to obsess over, whether or not we achieve the goal, but rather to look at the engine that determines whether or not we're getting to our goal, like the other things. Altogether, is that correct?
Overall, I think when you're keeping a diary, the most important thing is just to be keeping record in a somewhat scientific manner, and not getting too hung up on results. In the Book of the Law, it says basically it talks against the idea of lusting after results. So if you're keeping these records with that kind of a scientific manner to some extent, then that's going to go a lot further than getting really hung up on things and buying,
So it's like understanding, look at the factors that make the car work towards getting the goal rather than just at the destination.
Yeah, and also another important thing to think about is it's rather than trying to understand all the details of the where and why for from the outset, just start doing something. Because if you're not doing anything and you're too worried about trying to understand things intellectually from the outset, you're going to get too hung up and you're not going to get anywhere. So,
so just record the factors.
Yeah, if you want to build a car, the best thing to do is to learn everything you can about building a car, but then start building one. Because the chances are, even if you spend your whole life reading about how to build a car, you're never going to know how to do it until you actually get your hands dirty. And chances are, you're probably going to fuck things up at some point. You're going to screw up whatever you've done to the car. It's not going to work properly. It's not going to work efficiently. You may just get lost and completely lose your way with it. But just by starting, you're going to put the first steps in line, and those mistakes are actually going to be helpful because you're going to have a better idea of how to do things through those mistakes. So the experience is a lot more worthwhile than just reading about things and intellectualizing things. So this, again, with this picture analogy, we fill out the rest of the picture to a great extent by experience, rather than just reading books and filling in the blanks from, what we like to believe or what we think it makes sense and that sort of thing. And the record is going to help us greatly with that, because we can always go back. At any given point, you're going to have a certain understanding of the universe, and you're going to have a certain understanding of the way things work. But you're always subjective to it. So it's nice to have a record where you can go back and see where you were seeing things from a different angle and sort of get a triangulation based on that. It's also, I like the analogy of music theory as well, because as far as not needing to know what the goals are or what you're doing all this for right off the bat, when it comes to music theory, I don't know if we got musicians in the house here, but I know we got at least one or two, but with music theory, theory is the working word. I teach guitar and I teach music, so I like to use this as explain this in these terms. Music theory, it's the theory of how sound and pitch and whatnot works in order to create the effects on the listener that we want to create. So we have a set of guidelines, we have a set of, you have scales and chords, and you've got all these theories on how things go together in that. This is not a rule book that says this is the way it is, you do it this way. This is basically a roadmap that you're gradually fleshing out as you learn your theory and you put all these things together and you get the experience with working with it, so that you have this more detailed roadmap, so you have a better understanding of where you want to go, how you want to get there, and how the most efficient ways of getting there are. It doesn't mean you have to use specific roads on that map, and it doesn't mean you even have to stay in your car and follow those roads. You can, there's all kinds of other possibilities. But the better you have that picture of that map in your head, the clearer that map is in your head, the better off you're going to be in terms of controlling all these things. So one of the things you do as a musician is you learn all your theory and you get it really down so it's inside of you, and then you throw it all out the window and just allow your intuition to guide you creatively to some extent. So I mean, this analogy can work to one degree or another with these studies as
first
well.
learn the left brain way of doing things, and then throw it out, and let the right brain take over.
Yeah, to some extent. I think if you're using things intellectually, what happens is you're training things intellectually, and then this is setting things into a deeper level of your consciousness. Again, using the analogy of music, your fingers don't have brains, so if you're playing a guitar, they can't learn the same way your brain does. So your brain can understand what they're supposed to do, and it gets it really quick. So you try to force them to go fast, and I go through this constantly with students. So they want to go fast with their fingers, and they're like, oh, I get it now, so I'll just try and, but they don't have brains. You have to treat them like babies and baby them along. Because the way that they learn is by instinct, by repetition of like doing things over and over again. This is why we have to practice. And it's the same thing for anything in life that you want to succeed at.
It becomes so
Takes
automatic.
practice.
It becomes like a media you can mold yourself.
Well, exactly. So rather than intellectualizing things where the thought process takes a lot of energy, but the instincts are automatic and it's very streamlined in that sense. So, moving on, it is not necessary, okay, wait, I think I've read that. The experimenter is encouraged to use his own intelligence and not to rely upon any other person or persons, however distinguished, even among ourselves. And I think this is really important as well, because there's a tendency, especially when you're first getting your feet wet and trying to, move along. I don't know, I'm sure there's plenty of us who have a lot of experience with meditation and magic practice. There may be some of us who have none or little. I don't know what everyone's experience is. But regardless, the most important thing is to learn to trust yourself to some extent as well. So again, going back to the analogy of like reading all your books and everything like that, but the better you don't want that to hinder you. And you also don't want somebody else's advice to hinder you. For instance, myself, if I'm giving advice, don't just rely on that. So all of this comes down to you doing the work, keeping your records and whatnot, and learning what works for you most efficiently. So again, going back to the idea of like if you're keeping track of how to get yourself enthusiastic, or how to put yourself in the right frameworks, mind states for such and such practices. You learn what works for you, and you don't just assume that, oh, this person says that the best way to do that is to eat carrots and sit in meditation for 5 minutes, and then I'll be in the right state of mind. Or, you know what I mean, just whatever advice you might get from somebody. Try that, see if it works, but then also try other things. Experiment, do things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, or try things that are outside of the box, and see what actually works for you. This is what you want to be keeping track of. And this is an important point that they say even among ourselves. So even within a training system, whatever teachers you have through that training system are there to empower you, not to enslave you in such a way that they're telling you what you need to be doing and how you know what I mean. So this is all about your own personal path through this. And I don't think anyone can really help you or I anyway in the end. All you can do is empower somebody. You can help them to realize that it's that spark within themselves that is going to be the thing that they will drive themselves with. But, yeah. So the next thing we have there is the written record should be intelligently or intelligibly prepared so that others may benefit from its study. Now this is obviously, the idea of somebody else reading your diary that you've been keeping is obviously a touchy sort of thing for people. And it's not a comfortable thing to think about. And it depends on the situation. If you don't necessarily have to think in terms of somebody else reading your diary. There's systems out there such as the AA, and there's other training systems that do require that you submit a diary at the end of X amount of time. And it's to be gone over by the heads of that system. And the reason for that is not so that they can judge you as a person and make pass gross judgments on what you've been doing